Hey, look what we have found. A big sound in a small town. Far away from the bright lights. They're making music every night. Discover what is all around. A big sound. A big sound. In a small town. Big sound, small town. A really big sound. Big sound, small town.
You're listening to Big Sound Small Town with Sandy Carlton.
Come to the Earl Scruggs Music Festival September 1st through 3rd, 2023 at the Trine International Equestrian Center. Enjoy workshops and learning about Earl Scruggs, jam sessions, and of course headliners Emmylou Harris, Infamous String Dusters, and Green Sky Bluegrass.
Good morning. I'm Ken Hooper. I'm a luthier from Elkin, North Carolina, and something that I've been doing full time for the last 10 years, but it's one of those things I feel like I've been preparing for all my life.
Oh,
So,
we'll have to elaborate on that then a little bit.
and I'm glad to be here with you this morning, Sandy.
I'm glad to have you here. One of my first, not my first, but one of the first up really close and personal chances I had to hear one of your guitars is when Carly and Daniel were on the show.
Okay.
And he has one, right?
Oh, yeah, he does.
And it sounded just fabulous. And he let me play it, and we talked about it. And it's like, okay, I got to find this guy, and I got to find out about these guitars, you know.
Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad you did.
So it was really cool, and he talked to me about it a little bit. And I figure in his case, he must have put his order in when he was like 10 years old.
Yeah, he did. But, you know, he was a young guy. He's still a young guy.
He is still a young guy.
You know, I'm like a lot of these other guys that build guitars. You always end up helping out these younger guys that are getting started, and I enjoy seeing the younger guys getting started and growing in the music. And you want them to have a good instrument. If you can help them do that, it's always fun to be able to do that.
That's pretty much a good mission too. I try my best to get young musicians on this show so they'll get a little exposure, you know, because there's so much talent in North Carolina.
Yeah, really.
I mean, true. It's just amazing. So let's go back to your statement that you've been preparing to do this. Let's talk about that. I mean, you come from a musical background, obviously.
I do. I've been preparing all my life. Is doing stuff and building stuff with my hands is something that I've done ever since I was little. I was one of these kids that was slipping around really before he was old enough and carrying a pocket knife.
Oh,
you had to hide to carry a pocket knife. Sure. But I was one of those guys. And my dad, Bill Hooper, he was noted in the area for he tied some of the most gorgeous flies. He was a fly fisherman.
Oh,
and,
I fly fish too.
Yeah, he tied some of the most gorgeous flies, and he was also a wood carver. Nothing professional, but as far as carving ducks and carving figures and stuff, it was something that my dad just did, and it was something that I was always around. Right. So. Like a lot of people, I started out carving little balls and chains and so on and so forth. So it was just when I finally transitioned and developed a love and an interest for building guitars, it was something that it was just really easy to transition over into.
Sure. Well, I mean, you're talking fine woodworking skills. I mean, wood carvers, I know several of them, and that is really an art in itself. And it requires some patience, some careful work with very sharp instruments. You know?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. A lot of blood.
A lot of blood.
You're going to get cut.
Yeah, they talk about sweat equity and a lot of things. That's a blood equity, I think, and probably anything to do with wood.
It really is. It really is. It's something that's really come natural for me. I tell people I cannot. The things that I'm able to do with my hands, I can't take any credit at all, but just because God gave me a gift to be able to do it. I can just pick up something and carve it with a knife.
Yeah, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. So it's just a God-given thing that I've been able to do, and so I don't take any credit for it, but I'm fortunate. I feel blessed to be able to kind of channel that into something
Well-
that I love to do.
Well, and in that case too, you have a gift, but there again, with any gift, it does come with a lot of practice and embellishing your skills at it. I mean,
Yeah.
you
Yeah, that's
have that talent, but then you put in the hard work to make it become what it's become.
Right. That's true. That's
Because some people have some talent and they never use it. I mean,
Well, musicians,
Yeah.
musicians are. I am just, and I play guitar a little bit, and we used to have a group, and I played mandolin more than anything else. But I'm always blown away by like Daniel. You're talking about
Yeah,
Daniel,
yeah.
Daniel and Carly, and Darren Aldridge.
Yeah,
of course,
Darren.
down here. I'm just blown away by the musicianship of these guys that just can take one of my instruments and get up on a stage and what they can do with it. The sounds and the emotions that they can bring out in you from playing an instrument. That's a God-given
I
thing.
mean, I guess that must be really fulfilling. I mean, to think that you created this and then hear the sounds that come out
It
of it.
really is.
I mean, I could see that'd be one of those moments and emotions that not everyone gets to experience. I mean,
It really is. It really is. It really
and
is.
in your case, there's a difference between, say, I'm a good guitar player, but I'm not Darren. But to have really quality musicians making your instruments do what they do.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean,
It is. It's really humbling. And there again, I just feel so blessed. As earlier in the year, we were fortunate enough we went to the Grand Ole Opry, had a chance to go, and Darren and Brooke were playing at the Grand Ole Opry as they do all the time
They do.
nowadays.
Yeah,
every
they
time
do.
Every time you look around, they're playing the Grand Ole Opry. But Zach Arnold was playing,
Yeah,
and he plays
yeah.
for Rhonda Vincent
Right.
now, and he plays one of my guitars. He's got a lot of guitars,
Right.
but he plays one of my guitars. And that particular night, they were playing, and we were just sitting out in the audience, and it was a humbling experience
sure.
to be able to hear over. I don't know if you've ever been to the Opry, but it's just
I have.
It's an unbelievable place.
It is.
And over those speakers, just to hear the sound and hear it was humbling. It really was.
I'm sure. I'm really sure that it was.
Yeah.
Now take me back to. Okay, so I like doing this. Do you remember the first one that you made?
I do. My mother has got the first instrument that I built was an F5 mandolin.
Oh, well, I was going to. That's where I was going back to that. Did you start with the mandolin?
Yeah, I did. And a lot of people say, well, that's because it's generally understood that as far as building instruments, the arch top instruments are probably an order of magnitude more complicated
Yeah.
than flat tops.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
The builders of them will go to Gibson. I mean, those guys became famous just from building their
That's right.
so-
That's right. So I built playing music in college. I was playing the mandolin, and crazy me, think, well, I would really love to have a better instrument.
Sure.
Like a lot of people, I was playing a cheaper mandolin,
Sure.
and I thought, well, rather than go spend X amount of dollars, whatever that was in the early 90s, for a good instrument, I thought, well, I can get some wood. Here's a book. I can read this book, and I can build my own. Little did I know that, yes, you can do that, but it's going to be about 5 instruments later. It's not going to be that first one.
Sure. I mean, and that is one of the things I've learned with almost anything I do in life. By the third time, I can do it.
Yeah.
It's the first 2, maybe the first 3, you don't want anything to do with.
No, that's right. That's right. That's like my daughter. She plays fiddle. She's a fantastic fiddle player, Mary Claire. And somebody asked me, "Have you built her a fiddle?" And I said, "No, I haven't, because she's got a fantastic fiddle, and it sounds wonderful. And I just don't. I'm not fiddle making is not what I'm all about.
Right.
And I'm just not interested in going through the learning curve for what it takes
Sure.
to make a really good one.
All right.
Because I know I'm going to have to make 3 or 4 of them, and I'm just not.
Yeah,
I don't have time to do that.
I understand. Well, yeah, at this point, I'm sure you don't. I
Right,
mean,
right.
So how did that mandolin sound, that first one?
It sounded, about like you would expect. It sounded okay, but it wasn't any fun to play.
Did it sound better than the one you were playing?
It did.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, it really did.
So you did actually achieve what you set out to do.
Yeah, that's true. But it was just really, instrument makers have got a term for your first few instruments, and Wayne Henderson and I have talked about it. Somebody, when you first start out, your instruments are just really clubby.
Yeah, I can see that.
The necks are too big.
Yeah.
They're way overbuilt. They're heavy, and and my mandolin was no exception.
So did you continue the mandolin line? I mean, is that what obviously you built a second one, right?
I did. I continued. I've built a few mandolins. I think I've built 9 or 10 mandolins total. But the next instrument I built was a guitar, and I bought a kit. I got a kit from let's see, I can't remember if it was a Stuart McDonald kit, if it was an LMI kit, but it was a kit guitar. Back in the day, you could buy a guitar kit.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I put one together.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, it's not a good guitar.
Yeah. Well, really, you get that kit and you think, well, this is going to be like building a model car, but you get that kit and you open up the box and it's a box of wood.
Yeah, it is.
But that's what I did. That was my second instrument. And then I built a few guitars before I built another mandolin, but I still have a love for the mandolin. And I guess probably that was building instruments. That was what captured my attention the most. Was that scroll. The F5 scroll to me is one of the most gorgeous things that's ever been put on the earth. So I still enjoy doing that.
Yeah. All right. Well, and now. So when you moved to guitar, was it like your first guitar? Was it like your first mandolin?
The first guitar, it wasn't as bad because I was starting to kind of gain a knowledge of what it took to make wood vibrate and what it takes to make wood resonate.
Right.
And after you build several, then you kind of intuitively know that if something's really heavy and something's really stiff, that doesn't go hand in hand with vibrating naturally and freely. So the guitar was better than the mandolin, but it still wasn't anywhere near the guitars that I hoped
that you had in your mind that you wanted to build.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, now, did you have when you were beginning? Did you have access to good wood, or was it one of those things that is just one of those hit and miss things?
Well. Yeah, I did. But, that kind of goes along with the same line of thought that you have access to it, but you don't really know what good wood is.
Well, yeah, I can see that.
There's a learning curve, and that's a whole different aspect of it, but there's a learning curve from that aspect of it of understanding what makes good wood. It needs to be well seasoned. It needs to be the right species. It needs to be resonant, and it needs to be stiff, and there's just a lot of factors that go into it. Looking back on it in the early 90s, I remember seeing catalogs that LMI put out. You could buy some gorgeous Brazilian rosewood for $400.
Oh, yeah.
In the early 90s. You could buy Brazilian rosewood from LMI, which is a company in California. Anybody that builds guitars or knows anything about it, they know what I'm talking about when I say LMI. And they're probably saying, yeah, I remember that too, if they're my age. But you could buy Brazilian rosewood for $400 that would cost $4,000.
Oh, I'm sure.
Today.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I kind of kicked myself. That's one of those things I wish I had bought a room full of it back
as
then.
Much as you could have afforded, yeah.
But I didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been one of those things had you known. That might have been enough to the profit on that might have been enough to build all the instruments you ever wanted.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's. Then did you start with like a dreadnought design or?
I did. Yeah, I did. The dreadnought is, and I live in I was born and raised in Wilkes County. I live in Surrey County now, and somebody said you can't throw a rock without hitting a guitar pick in Surrey County.
That's true.
Wilkes is the same way. I mean,
is.
We're just so blessed, like you guys are down here in this neck of the woods.
Yeah.
We're blessed to just be the musical tradition. It's everywhere around you.
Sure.
You just grow up around it, and going to fiddlers conventions and going to just old festivals back in the day. Everybody's standing around picking dreadnought.
They are. I mean, really, growing up around here, that's the acoustic guitar that you have to be pretty old before you realize there's something else that anybody would really play.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
right. And that's the sound when you're walking through the parking lot at a fiddler's convention. And to me, outside, when you're walking through a parking lot and you hear that music, no microphones, no amplification, just that pure, clean sound, acoustic sound, that guitar, that's an acoustic dreadnought.
It is.
And most of the time it's an old Martin or it's an old Gibson.
True. And it's the ones too that any other size doesn't carry enough sound. I don't think loud enough to work within a Galax. Say you're at Galax. Well, if it's a smaller body guitar, you're just not going to cut through that stuff
That's
usually
exactly
too.
right.
So
Yep, exactly right. I built a lot of smaller body guitars, and I love smaller body guitars. The 00018,
Yeah,
the short
sure.
scale
I do.
00018 is to me is just a fantastic.
I love
gift.
those. Yeah.
But most of the guitars, most of those instruments are second instruments.
They are, yeah. I mean, I hadn't thought about it, but they are.
Yeah,
Unless somebody's a straight up maybe finger picker that's never done anything but finger pick.
That's right.
I would say that would be your second guitar.
Yeah.
It's always been my second or third guitar. You know.
Just sitting around playing by yourself on the couch.
Sure.
A little small body guitar.
Yeah.
A lot of ladies like the small
Sure.
body guitars,
Yeah.
and they've got their place. But at the end of the day, most people want that big,
They do.
booming, that powerful dreadnought sound.
When you were doing this, did you study did you study like Martins and Gibsons or?
Oh yeah.
I figured you
Absolutely.
had to.
Yeah, that's the gold standard. You
Yeah.
know, Martins and Gibsons, the pre-war Martins for me more than Gibsons. Now I've gained an appreciation for the old Gibson guitars more so in the last few years, but the pre-war Martins, that's the gold standard.
Well, it is a good sound. I mean, it is a good sound
It
without
really
a doubt, and a different sound than the Gibson sound.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
it's actually totally different in a
It
lot of
is.
ways.
Sure is. It is.
So did you like study the different bracings? I mean, how did you decide? I mean, there's a ton of ways to brace. I mean, how did you decide what you were going to do about that?
Well, I did. I studied, but early on, the Martin D, the forward shifted Martin D is kind of the gold standard. That's what everybody wants, and that's going to be the pre-30 or the pre-38 style Martin guitars. They're going to be forward shifted and they're going to be lightly braced. And I'm fortunate enough to live. I live not far from Wayne Henderson.
Yeah.
And he's always been a huge influence on me. So I spent a lot of time in Wayne's shop, and he's got one of the most unbelievable libraries of old instruments. You know, you call it just a collection. So
Sure.
if I wanted to see what the brace configuration of an early 40s herringbone,
Right.
or an early 50s D28 or an early 50s D18, I could go to Wayne's and he's tickled to death to get a mirror down and lay it down there in the shop and look at it. But generally he already knows. Like
You
say,
could
Wayne,
just talk to him about it.
Yeah. You can say, well, the early 50s D18s versus the late 30s D18s, and he'd start talking. He'd talk for 20 minutes. So
That's a good thing, though.
Yeah.
And then I guess you could go and look at it. I mean,
Then you
he'd
could
tell
look at
you
it.
about it, and then he'd show it to you.
Absolutely.
That's wealth that you can't buy. I mean,
That's right. That's right.
you are fortunate, because he is a very forthcoming guy too. I mean, he's it's not like he's trying to hide secrets from anyone. So
No, he's not. If you want to know something from Wayne, all you got to do is ask. And he and I are on the same wavelength on most anything guitar building. He and I are pretty much on the same wavelength. But it's not just me. You could walk in up there.
Sure,
and ask
that's
him
true.
And he'd say, "Sure,
True. Yeah,
You know.
that's true. It would float over my head, but yeah.
Well, I don't know. It would be. Of course, he's got a bunch of stories.
Yeah, he does, and that's probably been around and say that would be fun without a doubt. This is funny, kind of a side note. I got a son-in-law who's hiking the Appalachian Trail,
Oh, really?
and he was getting up near Wayne. I said, "You reckon you can take a side trip off of there?" And he said, "I can't. That's too far. I can't."
Well, that goes across the. I guess that's up in the Grayson Highlands Park.
Yes, it is.
It goes
Yeah.
through right there.
It does, yeah.
And that's not that far.
No,
Far, but
when you're walking, yeah. So I said, "No, man, unless you're coming to pick me up." That's what he said, unless you're coming to pick me up. So, yeah, that's where he's at. Actually, right now, I think he's past it now, but that was where, and he was complaining about the wind being 70 miles an hour and he could hardly walk. So,
Well, that's where they do the festival every year, and I put in a little plug there for Wayne's Festival.
Yeah.
It's the third Saturday in June.
yeah, coming up.
Rain or shine. They always say rain or shine. So
Sure.
And that's where it's at. It's up there in the Grayson Highlands State Park.
Yeah.
And it's just one of the most gorgeous places you've
It
ever
is.
seen. But I always tell people, it doesn't matter what the weather is like, where you're coming from, or what the weather's like, bring a sweatshirt.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I've been there many times. Yeah, that is true. Do you remember the first one you sold? Oh, wait, before we get that now. Okay, so you get it built. So did you learn about staining? I mean, that's hard too, or that part of it is equally as hard as the woodworking to get
Absolutely.
that right. I mean,
I tell people that people call it finishing,
yeah,
but it really should be called starting. Because it's two
Sure.
totally different disciplines. Putting the guitar together is a woodworker's discipline, but
Right.
then when you get over into the finishing aspect of it, it's totally different.
sure.
And they have nothing to do with each other. So you have to learn, it's just like you say, you have to learn two totally different things.
Yeah,
And the learning curve on the finishing is as steep as the building part of it.
I'm
It
sure
really
of that. I mean, that's one of the things I have learned is the staining part. I know a guy that's just what he does, for builders, and I think he even still wrestles with it all the time.
Oh yeah, you do. You never stop learning, and I'm no different than that than anybody in that respect. You're always looking for better ways, and you're thinking about finishes and what's compatible. This finish or this stain or this coloration is compatible with that, and it's a learning curve. And the thing about the early guitars, especially the Gibson made some of the most gorgeous sunbursts
Yeah, they did.
of anybody.
Yeah, I
head
have
over
them,
heels
yeah.
above Martin,
I agree.
in my opinion. But they didn't have access to the stains that we have today, so a lot of their finishes or their stains weren't as light fast as what we have. So
Right.
what they look like now may or may not been exactly what they looked like when they were first made.
True.
So you think about that, and but it's an endless learning.
How much does that affect the tone? I mean, can it kill a tone?
It can, without a doubt. I mean, putting too much finish on an instrument can absolutely kill the tone. I mean, it's like weighting it down. It's like putting a saddle on a thoroughbred.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people. So that's one thing over the years that I've really concentrated on is I don't get so much hung up on exactly what kind of finish it is,
Right.
whether it be nitrocellulose lacquer, which
Right.
is primarily what I use,
Yeah.
or there's a lot of conversion finishes, conversion varnishes, or whatever. I don't get so hung up on exactly what finish you use. The main thing is to use as little of it as possible.
Possible.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. But you also have to remember too, there's a standard. You want a supremely thin finish, but it can't look thin. And it's got to look good, but it's still got to be thin. It's still got to be resonant. So that adds time to the process.
I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure that's a tricky little thing.
It is. It is.
So I doubt there's a formula, right? I mean,
Well, you just have to be prepared. It's kind of counterintuitive to think, well, if you're putting less finish, then you should be able to do it quicker. But in actuality, putting less finish takes longer because you're always going to deal with sand throughs.
Yeah.
You're going to get to the end of the process.
Sure.
And it's like Wayne told me one time, he said, if you're not sanding through occasionally on your finishes, you're putting too much on it. And so I've gotten better at that over the years, and I do occasionally build a guitar that I don't sand through, thank the Lord, but especially with sunbursts.
Right.
If I'm getting to the very end of the process, I've got a guitar in my shop right now that I just glued the neck in yesterday, so I'll go home this afternoon and probably do the final polishing and glue the bridge on. If I sand through the sunburst on that guitar doing that final leveling and polishing, that's catastrophic.
yeah, it would be. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, you don't.
Have you done that?
I've done it.
Yeah.
I've done it. In a lot of cases, you can't fix it.
Well, that's
and it
where I
not
was going.
show.
Can you fix it?
Well, there again comes the guitar builder's luck. I always say, the old proverb, "May all your finishing mistakes be under the pick guard."
Yeah, I can see that.
So if I sand through and it's under the pick guard, or if I sand through and maybe it's where the bridge is going to be,
Sure, you're in good shape. You're
yeah,
fine. Yeah.
yeah. Or if you sand through and it's out on the very edge of the top where it's really dark, then you can go back and maybe airbrush and mask that. But if you sand through right in the middle of the bout behind the bridge, you might as well get the sandpaper and the lacquer thinner out and just start over.
Oh, no. Oh, okay, well, let's go with necks, because that's always a tricky thing with guitars, too. How did you decide what you were going to do with your necks?
Well, I've got big hands.
Yeah.
So I have to be really careful to not build. If I build something that's really comfortable for me, most of the time it may end up being too big for a lot of people.
Sure, me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So most of my customers, they want a pre-war style guitar, which is going to be a 1 3/4 inch nut width.
Right.
And I just measured a lot of guitars. I measured my main indicators. I measured depth at the 1st fret, and I measured depth at the 10th fret.
Okay.
So if you get the proper depth at the 1st and the proper depth at the 10th, and then you got a good straight line between everything, then everything's going to work out nicely.
Yeah.
So to me, the Martins, they built a line of guitars that most people are familiar with, the D18 Authentics.
Sure.
And to me, that's a very nice shape. The only problem is those guitars for a lot of people were too big. They were too bulky.
Yeah.
So I took that shape, which is a nice, and incidentally, it matches up with a lot of late 30s guitars, the shape does. But I took that shape, which is kind of a soft V down to the 5th or 6th fret, and then it becomes a little bit of a harder V as you get down to the 14th where it joins the body.
Sure.
So you can scale that, you can use that shape, and then you can scale that up or down depending on the customer.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so I'll use that shape, which I've never had anybody say that the shape doesn't feel nice.
Oh, that's good.
But you can adjust the thickness of it. If I've got a customer that's got smaller hands and they say they want a thinner neck,
Yeah.
then that guitar is usually going to be about 820 thousandths. At the 1st fret, it's going to be about 820 thousandths from the top of the fretboard to the very apex of the neck on the back side. It's going to be about 820 thousandths. And then it's generally down at the 10th fret, it's going to be 100 thousandths from the top of the fret to the bottom of the neck.
Sure.
If somebody wants a real vintagey feeling thicker neck, then you'll go up to 860 or maybe even 870 thousandths at the 1st fret. And that's going to be a little bit of a handful for most people. But
yeah, that'd be a handful for me. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's kind of how I gauge it.
That's pretty good. How about frets? Too. That's another thing. So, how have you chosen the frets that you use?
Well,
and the fret sizes.
Well, there's kind of a standard size.
There is kind of a standard size.
Yeah. I will usually defer from a crown height and a width standpoint back to the pre-war wire. That's kind of what people expect on fret wire. But the hardness is what you get into more than anything. Now 99% of my guitars, I use Evo frets. Okay. Are you familiar with
I am. Yeah.
The Evo Gold frets?
Yeah.
99% of my guitars, unless somebody wants something really traditional, which is nickel, I'll use Evo frets, which I use that really because the hardness, Evo is almost exactly halfway between stainless and nickel on the hardness scale. And I think the pre-war wire that Martin used back in the 30s, I think it was harder than the nickel that you can get today. A lot of pickers, if they pick a whole lot, if they're really, and they've maybe got a strong left hand, if you build a guitar and put nickel frets on it, they'll be needing to either dress and in some cases have to have more frets in 6 months. I mean, they'll really, they can really chew frets up.
Right. Well, I mean, even with my playing, I've chewed frets up, and that is really a constant thing, also a constant thing of who's going to refret it too.
Right. And a lot of that depends on the player. A lot of that depends on, like I say, how strong their left hand is. Some people have a really light touch and they don't wear frets as much. But Evo frets, for most people, are the last frets that you'll ever have to put on a guitar.
Great. Yeah, I mean, that's really good.
And they're really, Tom Ellis told me one time, most people are familiar with Ellis mandolins. He told me one time, he said, that is the primo wire to put on a mandolin because mandolins chew up frets more so than guitars. And there again, you put Evo frets on a mandolin, and for most people, that's the last frets they'll ever need.
That's great.
Yeah, that's his standard wire on mandolins too, by the way.
Well, I mean, that's what have we oh, I guess, yeah, let's talk. I mean, we're talking your guitar, so let's talk bridges and nuts, and
Okay.
how do you decide on that?
Well, for that, most of the time, there again, I use the 30s Martins. You can always go back to the 30s Martins, and that's your gold standard.
Yeah.
You can deviate away from it and do a few different things. I'm a traditional guy, so most of the time I'm going to stay pretty close to that standard. And the pre-war Martins, all the way up until 40s and 50s. Well, Martin used ivory. They used ivory nuts and saddles.
Right.
And I do that occasionally, have done that occasionally. But to me, the closest to those old pre-war Martins nowadays for the stuff that's readily available is just bone.
Just bone.
Cow bone.
Yeah.
And it's hard to beat just good old cow bone. People use different things.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, I like the consistency of bone nuts and saddles.
All the guitars that I've ever liked had bone nuts,
Yeah,
So.
a lot of people have experimented with some synthetics, like Tusk. I think that's a commercial name for a synthetic material. Maybe Gibson introduced that, or Collings, I don't know, or Taylor, I don't know. But it's hard to beat. At the end of the day, it's hard to beat bone.
And it's still readily available, unlike a lot of things. That was where I was going to when we were talking about Brazilian. Are you having trouble getting wood?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering that.
Yeah. It's good wood. It's like you said earlier. Good materials is a huge part of what I do. And Brazilian, you can still get Brazilian, but the really good stuff, the really nice quarter sawn stuff, it's really expensive.
No, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it's really expensive. I'm sure you're upping the price greatly when you.
It's not unheard of to have an upcharge for somebody to pay $4,000 or $5,000 or even $6,000
Sure.
for a nice set of Brazilian rosewood, and it's simply supply and demand.
Yeah.
It's just not there that much. So if you're going to get it, it's expensive.
What woods do you use the most?
Well, we had a conversation, Darren and I. We were talking earlier this morning. It's mahogany probably is. I have a lot of people like D18s.
Yeah.
And just it's hard to beat a good old D18.
I agree.
And the good thing about the D18 is it's mahogany.
Yep.
And good mahogany, fortunately, is still available. It's still readily available out there in the marketplace. It's getting harder to find because I've gotten where I'm more and more picky as far as what I use. I like the old stuff.
Right.
And I just recently resawed Scott Freeman, a friend of mine from back home, who's one of the most fantastic mandolin players and guitar players that I know. He was my daughter's fiddle teacher. He found an old harvest table at a flea market somewhere up in Galax, and he brought me 2 boards. And that's been probably a couple of years ago, and I've had them standing up in my shop ever since he brought them. And it was quarter sawn mahogany. That's what it was.
That's great.
And a couple of weeks ago, I took those boards up to Wayne's shop and resawed them. And it's some of the most gorgeous mahogany you've ever seen, just fine grained and quarter sawn. And Wayne said, "That's the real stuff. That's the real stuff. That's what they used in the 30s." So I'm always, Robin, my wife, and I, if we go through a flea market or an antique shop, we're always looking at we're looking at old furniture, but unbeknownst to the people that come up and help us, they don't know.
They don't know that
looking to take it apart.
Hey, I'm going to dismantle this thing. I'm taking this home, but I'm not going to use it as a table. Yeah. Oh yeah.
They're talking about maybe an old table or something. They're talking about where it came from,
Sure.
and the legs and all this other stuff.
No,
they don't
it.
know. I'm just this is going to a planer, going to a
Yeah.
bandsaw.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So don't tell them.
That's funny. That is funny. No, because if they knew, then they would double the price.
Yeah.
It'd be like one of those things. Like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. That is. I wondered how hard it was to find the wood that you needed. So.
It's getting harder, and tops are the same way.
Well, that's where I was going next. How about tops? I mean,
Same way. I am almost exclusively a red spruce guy as far as tops on my instruments, and red spruce, Appalachian spruce, Adirondack spruce is another name for it, but the technical term is red
It's
spruce.
red spruce.
And in order to get that pre-war sound, that 30s sound that everybody wants, it's got to be red spruce on the top. And that's getting harder to find. The type of wood that I look for is you can buy red spruce all day. You can go on eBay.
Right.
You can get it you can find it anywhere and buy red spruce, and it's fine, but I really enjoy being able to find something that's been put up in somebody's barn for 30 years and has been curing, has been hot, cold, wet, dry, hot, cold, wet, dry over the years for 30 years. It's hard to estimate how much that it's really kind of like a natural torrefied top if it's been through that process.
Yeah,
So
I can see that.
yeah, and I'm fortunate to have kind of a stash of red spruce that I got from a gentleman up in West Virginia, and it had been up in his barn for 30 years.
Yeah, that's
And,
pretty.
yeah.
And I guess you're always looking for that too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You always keep your eye out for that.
Yeah.
And there's red spruce. You can't find it like in antique stores or flea markets like you can mahogany.
I
or
can
even
see
Brazilian
that.
rosewood.
Sure.
But it's out there.
That's good. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Now, okay, say I'm wanting a guitar. I'm wanting you to build me one. So what's the next process with that? I got a listener here, he's been looking, he's heard your guitars, he wants one. So what is his option?
Well, most of the time people will call me and we'll talk about what they want, and it's really not a complicated thing. For a long time I charged people a deposit, and I've quit doing that because unfortunately for people, my list has gotten so long now that I don't take a deposit. I tell people, look, I'm not going to take a deposit because I don't know something may happen to me.
Sure.
And my list is 4 years or better now. Actually, I tell people 3 years, but it's actually probably stretched out to 4 years. But generally, what's involved is people just call and we talk on the phone, and they tell me what they're looking at, and they tell me what they like, and the thing about the list being that long, and you and I talked about it before you push the record button, but people that come to me and they want something that I've made or built, they understand, like a lot of other people, they can't just come in there and get it.
They know that beforehand. If they're coming to you, because it's also an investment, a fairly chunk investment. So you have to know that when you're coming in there. So
Yeah, that's right.
so time and money, they already know when they're coming to you.
Yeah, they already understand that, and they understand that it's going to be a process. It's going to take a while to get that. But in the course of that, I'll usually talk to them over the course of that period going by. I'll usually talk to them several times on the phone, and really what happens is you end up getting to know somebody.
I was going to say a relationship forms with that.
Yeah,
it's kind of like the podcast works, kind of.
Yeah, that's right. And that's kind of what you get with a custom guitar. And at the end of the day, I always tell people, we've gone through this process together, building something that's inanimate. It's it's wood, and it's but at the end of the day, I've usually got another friend.
Yeah, I agree.
It's vice versa in a relationship, just like what you're talking about.
Yeah, I can see that. It's a good problem to have, though, that you're. I mean, we're not looking really to get you any business from this podcast because you got more business than you can handle.
Yeah, that's true. But it's always fun to talk about guitar.
True, it is, and that's what we're doing. I mean, I decide today I want one. At my age, I don't know that I'll see it to fruition, So, it might be. And I'm glad you wouldn't take a deposit on it because I'd probably never see it. But also another thing too, you don't see a lot of yours up on for sale places either, do you?
No. Once in a while, I want to pop up, and it doesn't happen much. But
I looked pretty hard before we did this podcast because that's just one of the things I research stuff,
Right.
And I looked to see, and they're pretty scarce out there.
Yeah, they are. There was one. I guess the last one that popped up was it popped up at Carter's.
Yes, yeah. They still have. I think they still have that. It's gone, but it's still. I think that Carter still has
Yeah,
that.
it popped up. It was a 12 fret D. Is what it was. It was a Brazilian rosewood.
He has a good looking guitar.
It
yeah,
was, and it
yeah.
was a great guitar. But I built that guy 2 guitars. I built at the same time. He was from a guy from out west somewhere, but I built him a 000 12 fret and a 12 fret D at the same time. Both Brazilian rosewood, both that same appointment, that same level of appointments. But that thing popped up on Carter Vintage, and I think they were on like $14,000 for it. And I thought, my goodness, I know that's not what he had in it. So, I thought that was pretty cool, but it's gone.
It's gone. Yeah. Actually, that was the only one that I could find any time recent was that one.
Yeah.
And it was a great guitar. I mean, yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
So
that 12 fret configuration, and when you couple that with Brazilian rosewood and a nice piece of stiff red spruce, I mean,
I'm sure
it will. They have the possibility of rattling the windows.
Yeah,
as they say.
I'm sure it does. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of a comforting thing too to think people aren't out there reselling your instruments.
Yeah, it is. It is.
That's,
Well, you're always glad when it's always kind of rewarding when people appreciate what you do.
of course, most of the people who get you to make them a guitar are professionals, for the most part.
Yeah, a lot of them are, but then, a lot of them are not. I build guitars for a lot of people that don't really even play much.
Really?
They just have a love for the instrument.
Well,
They just
I do
love
understand that too.
Yeah, just love guitars, and that's fun too. It's fun. That goes back to what we were talking about. It's fun to be able to kind of interact with all different types of people that are looking for all different kinds of things. Those people, a lot of times, they're just really hung up on the appointments and hung up on this and that, and that's fine too. I say that's if somebody's getting a custom guitar, then that's what you're getting in the process. You're getting to participate in all those little details,
Which is pretty cool and something that I didn't even think about before we did this, but that is something that is really, I mean, that's pretty special, really.
It is.
I mean, you can't do that with a car. I mean, you can't do that with very few things, really.
You can't do that with a factory instrument.
No, you can. No, God, Lord Jesus, no, you can't do that.
You can't do that.
No.
I have customers that come in from all over the place. They'll fly in when I'm carving the neck.
Oh, yeah, to watch it, to see it.
Well, you have to watch it, and I'll carve the neck. I can get pretty close. They can describe to me pretty close to what they want, and I'll be carving that neck. And if they're in the shop with me when I'm doing it, I'll carve on it, and then I hand it to them, and they say, "Yeah, this feels good," or take it down a little bit more here, a little bit more there, and I'll do it. So,
Oh, yeah, you can't get. There's very few things in life you can get like that anymore.
yeah, that's right. So that's kind of a benefit.
Yeah, that is a benefit.
And I always tell people, I have people that'll come up. I have people come by the shop and hang out all the time. And if I tell people when I'm working on your guitar, if you want to come hang out and watch me, you can. And I'll load you up with pictures. I was blessed here recently that I got an iPhone 12. I upgraded from my iPhone 7.
Sure, I do understand. Only reason I have a new phone is I ran over mine, or I would still be. Well, it was better than a flip, but it was like an 8.
Well, I think mahogany dust killed mine. Finally.
I can see that too. I mean, I have no doubt of that.
But I couldn't believe how much better the picture
They
taking
are.
quality was in the 12 versus the 7. So I cover people up in pictures if they want it.
Yeah, I would. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, and I say, look, I'll cover you up in pictures. If you want to come hang out when I'm doing it, come on. But if you want to get the most bang for your buck, come when I'm carving the neck.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You can give me some input.
Sure. Well, now, one other thing that we did leave out, and I probably not something anyone does with yours. No one ever wants an ornament inlay of any type, do they? Or do they?
Well, they do to a point. You see a lot of guys, that's kind of what they focus on. You look at their guitars, and their guitars are just
Sure.
over the top.
Yeah.
They've got the tree of life up and down the fretboard. They've got pearl on the peg head, just everywhere. And that's not so much what I'm into. I can do that, but most of my customers are kind of traditionalists.
Sure.
They're looking for the 30s type guitars,
Yeah.
and within that, you can do some like you can put a little something special on the peg head,
Right.
a little something unique. You can put a little something like a name down on the
Right.
you know, in the fretboard or whatever. You can do a little something like that, but
Do you have to farm that out, or do you do that?
I've got a guy that does that CNC cuts my logos. A guy in Pilot Mountain, David Mathis is the guy's name, and he cuts about everybody's pearl up in that neck of the woods. He cuts Wayne's pearl,
Sure.
his logo. I think he cuts Jimmy's pearl. He cuts Spencer Strickland's pearl. He cuts about everybody's pearl, just simply from a time standpoint.
Sure, I understand that.
Yeah,
too.
I can sit down with a jeweler saw and cut pearl all day, but he can do it a lot quicker, and so I end up getting him to cut my pearl.
Sure.
You know.
Well, I mean, and that's really a small part of the instrument. I mean, we're looking. Okay, I'm asking you as a professional builder, how much does that impact the sound?
The pearl?
Yeah.
0.
Zero.
Yeah.
So if you've got say Darren's neck over there is just loaded down, the tone won't be any different.
0.
Ah, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I mean,
0.
I always wondered if you know, I mean,
Now, you know, that may be, I don't know, I would put that over in the category of just being maybe barely debatable. You might have somebody that would, because I know banjo players that swear up and down that gold plating sounds different than silver plating. Okay, I don't know that. Maybe if you play the banjo, maybe you can hear a difference, but to me, there's no way that can have a perceptible impact on the sound. But now it can impact the feel.
oh, I could see where it would the feel.
Yeah.
But that's a good question because I've never asked that of anyone and never known the answer if someone would ask me.
Well, and then you hear people talking about the sound of the tone of a D45.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
I
So-
mean, and it's loaded up.
It's loaded up with pearl, but the only place that it could have a perceptible impact would be around the top,
Sure.
where you're putting that pearl around the top. And the only way that it could impact the tone, in my opinion, would be if that channel, you cut that channel wider, so you're cutting that spruce a little bit thinner where that pearl is, and you also may be thinning that top down around the outer edges in order to true up and level up all the pearl and stuff that's
I
together.
got you.
So there may be some difference. You may be able to hear some differences in sound from that standpoint.
Well, how about like herringbone? Does that change?
No, because if you don't use herringbone is wood.
Right, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you don't use herringbone as the purfling around the
Right.
top, you generally use something else.
Yeah.
So you're putting some other type of wood into that channel rather than herringbone. So no, it
Well, I've
doesn't.
heard that debate. You know, that's one of them things you hear. You know, my herringbone one sounds better than my regular D28. You know, my herringbone. You know.
Well, most of the time, if you're out and somebody says, "I've got a herringbone," then they're talking about a pre-war
True.
D28.
True.
And yeah, they do have a different
Yeah,
sound.
they do.
You know?
Yeah, but it's not because
It's
of the.
not 'cause of
it's
that
not the
herringbone.
herringbone. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, gotcha.
No.
Yeah, gotcha on that. So, what else we need to know?
Well, I don't know. I can talk all day. You know, it would. There's just, it's a lot of different. I tell people when you think about building guitars, it's something that I kind of put on autopilot now, but it's really just a lot of little steps. That one thing that just kind of builds on the other step, and at the end of the day, you put all the pieces together, and you've got a whole lot of little variables that come together, and you hope everything lines up like it needs to line up, and it sounds like you envision it sounding.
All right.
So,
Well, now, would you advise a young person that was thinking that he would like to do this? Is this a good field?
well, it has been for me.
Right.
I've been blessed.
I mean, the builders are aging.
They are, and it's a hard thing to do. It would be a hard thing to do for a young builder to start just from scratch.
Sure.
Nobody knowing who they were, nobody knowing anything about their stuff, and make a living at it.
Sure, I can see that.
Yeah, that'd be tough.
Because it's a high investment. There's a high cost into being able to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
tools, wood,
Absolutely, and I eased into it.
right?
I went to school. I graduated from Appalachian State
Sure.
in the early '90s, and then I went to work in the public sector. I worked in a textile mill. I was in industrial engineering, and I was a quality manager. And the last place I was working was at the candle factory there in Elkin. I was a manufacturing manager there. But I had always done my stuff on the side just because I loved it.
Right.
And acquired tools and so on and so forth over the course of a lot of years. And in the course of doing that, I had a list of people that wanted my guitars.
See, that's good.
Yeah. So I've been doing it full time for 10 years, and I just got to the point that I just felt I had just gotten to the point that I was miserable doing what I was doing. And I've always believed and still do that one of the ways that God makes you aware of what your calling is it's probably something that you love to do.
Yeah, true.
And I just realized that it was something that I had a calling to do, and it was there. So 10 years ago, after a lot of praying and soul searching by me and obviously my wife.
Sure, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And I was in a position that I could do it. We had our house paid off, so we did have two girls that were in the process of being in school, so we had to think about that. But we didn't have a huge amount of debt, and I had a big backlog of instruments to build.
Yeah.
And so we decided to go ahead and take the plunge and do it. And I've been blessed. I've got a whole lot more to do today than the day I made the decision to walk out of the factory.
And if you designed it on paper, that would be the way that you would want it to be.
That would be the way. But that's not what a lot of young people want to hear.
No, they don't.
They want to be able to, they want to say, well, how can I do that and do it now or do it in 6 months? And it would be hard to do unless you're already rich.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, there have to be enough people out there that know about your instruments to create a demand.
True.
Because with the demand goes the increased prices on the instruments.
Sure.
That's the only. I'm a one-man band in my shop, so that's the only way I have to control demand is you increase the price.
Sure.
So you can't do that if nobody knows about your instrument.
And that alone is hard too.
It is.
And then along the way you get people. Well, I mean, you got like Darren here. You know, you get exposure right there to people who are in the market for that. I mean, you know.
It's hard to estimate the value of that. You have people like Darren and the caliber of musician that he is, and you and I talked about that earlier. The caliber of musician that they are playing your instruments, you can't measure how valuable that is. Plus the friendships.
True. And you know, he's going to expose your instrument to people, say, that I would never have the chance to.
That's right.
You know, because he is around a working community of people who, and number one, they also have the love, and they also in a financial state generally that they can afford it.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Which that's invaluable. I mean, you can't put a number on it. No, and it's a hard thing to figure too. I mean, you got to find a Darren, or you got to find somebody like that to spread the word for you, and that's not the easiest thing in the world.
Well, that's something that takes years to develop.
True.
It's not something you're going to do overnight. You've got kids out there, and Darren can tell you there's people everywhere. I say kids, people that are just starting doing this kind of. They have the love to do it.
Right.
But you've got people out there that would love to give somebody an instrument. They'll give you an instrument all day long.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I've even had them give me. That's all I know. You know.
But I never was in a position where I could afford to give instruments away.
Right.
You know, so that was. I've been really blessed.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say that would be because. For 20 years, Horner Harmonicas have been sending me Horner Harmonicas. Everything that's new, they send them to me, you know. And I got that as a kid, kind of as a young person, you know. And they've done that for 40 something years now, yeah. Really? And every time they come out with something, they send me a complete set of, you know, not a complete set, but like 7 of them in the you know. E, A, G, but you know, they don't send me stuff like E flats and stuff like that, but the A's, D's, G's, and C's they'll send, which is really good. But there again, they have hundreds of people that they do that to.
Right.
But there again, their time. I mean, they're mass produced, so they're not a one man deal. You know, so
Well, that's the good thing about having the personal relationship is your instruments almost get multiplied. In other words, somebody
True,
like that,
I agree.
more people can see. And early on, I had a relationship with Smoky Mountain Guitars. They're out of business now.
yeah.
But I built a few guitars and sold them through his shop up there. And a lot of people came through, and I could sell a guitar on my own, but I could sell one through his shop, and it kind of multiplied the exposure.
Right, yeah, because you would have people come through and,
Yeah.
and play it.
Yeah.
Actually put their hands on it and play it, which is another thing too.
Yeah, that's right.
And which is another thing. We actually have Darren here with us today, and I think Darren's going to show what I guess it's not going to be show because this is audio. He is going to let people hear what one of your instruments sounds like.
Good.
So is there a story about this guitar? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember
I was-
making it? And do y'all remember?
I've been holding back, just letting y'all talk, but I'd love to brag on Ken a little bit.
Yeah, we'd love
I've
for it
got a
too.
ton of guitars,
You do.
Sandy, and I've got a lot more in the last 5 years since I've got this guitar, but playing more and the more success that Brooke and I had and just traveling and picking, I wanted another guitar to take out on the road to be a great workhorse guitar. And I got to know Don Wilson. I was doing a lot of picking with Alan Shadd at that time,
Yeah.
and being up around Galax and a lot of the different builders through Wayne. I'd met Wayne before, but didn't really know him very well. And the word had kind of got out to a couple other people I was looking to get a custom guitar. And all those folks had told me that Ken was the best to build it from everybody. And he said that Don really praised you, as you know, Ken.
Well, you're embarrassing me.
And so did Wayne and just all the guys,
Right.
you know, and I could have picked anybody to get one. But, I mean, the Lord worked it out for me and Ken to be friends, and we became close friends since. And he did. He went through all the steps that he just told y'all about building this guitar, from picking out the wood to the type of shade that I wanted. And
Beautiful
nobody
guitar.
does a beautiful shade as good as Ken does.
We are
And I've
going to
had
show
folks-
this. We are going to do this so people can see this. That is one of the things that, even though it's audio, I put up pictures too. So
That's a good idea.
You know, so yeah, they need to see that too. So
I've had several folks, even Collins Guitars and others, that see me play this on
Sure.
stage or seen pictures of it, and then not really see the headstock, but just call and ask me, "Man, when'd you get one of the Collins guitars?"
oh yeah,
That looks like something like we'd put out. I Ken built this for me.
And a lot of those guys are my friends too at college.
yeah.
I know
well,
a lot of those guys.
I mean, I have a Collins, and it is a fine guitar.
It really is.
But I've actually heard him play this before, so you know it's
But I've played this guitar since I got it in 2017, probably more than anything that I got on stage.
This got a lot of miles on it.
It
but-
does. I have. It's probably, I play it 90% of the time at every show we do.
I see. That's great. I mean, that is really good.
And that's a standard. That would be one of my standard D18s. That's old growth Honduras mahogany on the back and sides, and then that's a red spruce top, same just like you and I are talking
Right.
about. And then up on the peg head, Darren doesn't tell people when he's traveling or crossing into foreign countries, but that's Brazilian rosewood on the peg head.
Oh, okay.
Don't tell anybody.
Oh,
but-
yeah. Well, yeah. Well, they won't know if you
Yeah.
don't tell. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah. But other than that, it's pretty standard. Ebony fretboard and ebony bridge.
What you did around the sides here with the wood.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
right. That's ebony binding on
Oh,
the.
yeah. Let's
on
get a good picture of that too.
Yeah, and that's a little different too. That was a little special touch. There's not any plastic on that guitar. It's wood.
I did not think
Down to the end pins.
after this, I did not think that there was any.
Well, the Martins, most of the Ivoroid, you put Ivoroid on
True.
the binding, which is kind of a high speed plastic, so to speak.
Well-
but I do like to do wood on its binding.
I mean, that is pretty cool.
Yeah, they do.
Also, this is, and I think we're having. I don't think this correlates, but maybe Okay, you didn't install his pickup system, did you?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, well, see, that's another thing we're about to leave out here. So, how do you decide what pickup system you use?
Well, now Darren is the performer,
Right,
and I am no expert on pickups.
right.
So generally, my customers will come to me. They'll
And
want,
tell you what they want.
yeah, they'll tell me what I want, and they play in a lot of big venues.
Sure.
And stepping up to a microphone and moving around, and they need power. He needs
Right.
power in a lot of situations.
Sure.
And to me, an acoustic, a pickup system, you're kind of walking the line between messing the acoustic response.
Oh, yeah,
up
I
and
agree totally. I
electronic.
mean, that is one of the hardest things when moving from an acoustic to playing it on stage. I mean, you go back to we'll use Tony Rice. Tony, live, sometimes you couldn't hear because Tony was going to just stand in front of that microphone, and sure, it would sound good, but a lot of times it would be lost. It would be buried by other instruments, and that is a really tricky combination to make it sound good and
Well,
work.
that's right. And Darren had his own. He's been a professional
Sure.
musician for a long time, and he had his own perceptions on what he wanted from that system, and that's what we put in it. And it's a big part of their sound. When Darren and Brooke get up there, they got their own signature sound.
Sure.
I researched a lot to see what pickup would be good to put in there, and of course talked to Ricky
Yeah.
and Vince both, and asked them what they used most of the time to get more of the best acoustic sound.
And what did you go with in
I
there?
went with a Lyric from LR Bags.
Yeah.
And I've got K&K and Fishman and stuff like that and other guitars, depending on the set.
Right, yeah, I
Got
do,
a
yeah,
lot
sure.
of more loud amplifiers and drums and stage volume.
Right.
This might not be the best pickup.
Right.
Because it's really a microphone underneath,
Sure.
the bridge.
Right.
And it's don't have an undersaddle, but it sounds very natural. And I've got more compliments on that. I run it through a Audio Sprockets is I think the company name. It's a Tone Dexter.
Right.
Just a preamp through this, but I just run it straight through. I don't do any kind of the imaging on it.
Right. Oh, that's
And
cool
I've
too.
got many people, tell me how natural the guitar
And
sounds.
I guess 99% of what you do these days is in ear.
Yeah, it is. That's another thing that's a plus.
Sure, and I would think particularly with that system, that would really be a plus as opposed to having to use a wedge and try to hear
You
it
got
through
a
that stuff.
wedge, coming back at you one direction and a bass amp
Yeah.
close to you and the loud
Sure.
volume, your guitar's going to feed back.
Yeah, it is. Which I guess you don't have that hardly
You
ever
don't have
anymore.
it that much at all, so
Yeah.
it's a clean sound.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, that is a part we didn't address that is, there again, you can take a guitar that is fine if you're sitting here, it's great, it's a wonderful guitar, and you can plug it in, and all of a sudden it's a whole totally, maybe not even a good
We've
guitar.
been blessed to do the Opry a lot over the last several years, and they prefer us to plug up
Yeah.
every time we step out there.
Sure.
So
But I mean, there again, they've kind of, they understand the technology and have it down to an art these days, as opposed to going to, you're playing in a church and sometimes you're just, you're plugging up, but you don't know what you're going to get.
right.
So that is pretty cool.
Yeah, they're pros at the Opry. I was blown away.
Oh,
when we
yeah,
got
they're
there.
pros.
It was
Man,
cool
the
to-
sound it's just a wall of sound, and it's
Ken to be
clear.
there that night, and but
Yeah.
two of his guitars were there.
Oh, I know. I was just we talked about that earlier. You heard us talking about it. I was just
And that was just, that wasn't planned, right? I mean, that was just one of those things that just
we knew about it to start with, but I think Zach had
and Rhonda.
just got with Rhonda.
Yeah, Zach had just got with Rhonda, and they were there too. And we were sitting out in the
We
audience,
had
and
two hoopers. There.
made me want to cry.
yeah, I can see where it would. I definitely can see where that would make you want to cry.
Tear up a little bit. Anyway.
Sure,
Meant to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm busting with pride. I'm sure that's yeah.
I mean and them getting to play. I mean, and they've played how many times?
We've played over 50.
Yeah, they
50
played a
times. I
bunch.
mean, that's just an incredible place. If anybody out there listening, if you haven't been to the Opry, most people probably have. I hadn't. That was my first.
Sure.
You need to go.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, yeah, you do need to experience that
Yeah.
without a doubt. In fact, speaking of that, this will probably air. You're playing there this weekend, right?
We're playing Saturday.
Yeah. So that's a pretty good Easter.
Easter weekend,
Yeah,
yeah.
pretty good Easter weekend.
took it out of the case.
That's
This
good.
guitar stays in tune better than any guitar I own.
That's another thing too, which, yeah, I mean, that is pretty
I
special.
don't really ever have to tune it on stage with a capo, sliding it up
Sure.
down from B to C.
Yeah, you don't have to do that.
It's
That's
as
great.
true a guitar as I've got.
That guitar's really opened up nicely too. He's played it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 2017, is that what he said? 2017. Yeah, it sounds great. I mean, that's too cool.
And I have let Ken help maintain it over.
Well, I would, they see, and that was another thing too. Do you have to? I mean, I guess he.
I love to take it up there, and he says he's my guitar tech.
Yeah. I mean,
He really is supposed to come up there and eat flounder at John Boy.
well, that works too. It's
We did have to fix a finish dent on the back of it one time where somebody jerked the chair out from under him at Merlefest
Sure did, man.
really.
on the
Yeah, it was
stage.
On stage?
On stage, and we just got through, and I think I had maybe one of my cotton cases or something I was going to put in, so I grabbed one of the chairs to sit down, because I'm a tall guy,
Yeah.
to bend over and put this thing in the case. And man, one of the stagehands was getting stuff up
Oh, it's
around
terrible.
the thing, and he jerked the chair out from under me, and I went to the ground.
That's,
Banged the back of it up, but you can't even tell where it was now. 'Cause I
Yeah,
took
we
it to
just
Ken.
polished it out. It wasn't that big a deal. It was kind of funny though.
yeah.
It
Yeah.
was
It could have been bad
I
though.
hadn't seen that guy since.
Yeah, I bet.
I think they named the stage after me over there. I remember I took it to, we flew to Prague and played, and I wanted to take it. This was the year after I got it. And Brooke just had got me one of those nice mono cases that you can fly with. It's
Yeah.
not a backpack case, but it's really durable, and it's not, I mean, you can't run over it, but it's the best kind of gig bag case that you can get.
Right.
Professional grade. And it's meant to fly with, and so it's easier to carry through the airport. And you can put it in an overhead, all that. So I was proud to have it with me and take it over there. And we was playing for Rasta Chopik, which is an instrument mandolin and banjo builder. So I wanted him to see this guitar. On the way back, we had no trouble flying at all. On the way back, me and Matt Menifee was playing banjo with us. He had the same type of case. They would not let us get on the plane with it.
Really, coming back.
Coming back.
So
they
what'd you
said
have
They
to-
wanted to check it, and we raised all kind of sand, to say we wasn't
Right.
going to do it. And he was going to take. This was in, I believe it was in Prague or Amsterdam. He was going to take our ticket from us, and I thought I was going to have to really start to get kind of redneck on
Yeah,
him over there.
sure.
But Matt, he went beyond, because he flies overseas all the time. His wife was from Germany, so I just kind of stepped back and let him take it. That we needed these instruments, everything else. But the sad part of the story is they didn't let us take them. They checked them, didn't even do it as a carry-on, didn't put it in the special compartment. They run it through luggage.
Oh,
So we wasn't gonna see it till we got back to Atlanta.
oh, that would be.
And I was just like,
Yeah, I would be. Heck yeah.
my guitar's gonna be busted when I get back. But it finally, on the plane, and Brooks settling me down enough, and me praying enough about it, and I had enough faith in Ken that if something happens to it, he can fix it.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. I mean, that would be my fault.
That's where I come to rest easy.
That would be. See, that's another plus if you're thinking about getting someone to custom build you an instrument. You do have that faith that it could be put back together.
Yeah, I mean, I could have just built him another.
Luckily, there wasn't anything wrong with either one of them. It's
So that says a lot for the-
made it.
Airline and the case,
Yeah,
right?
That
I
was a
guess
miracle.
He pink tagged them, but it did. It went through luggage. We didn't get them most of the time when you fly. And I've never took that case since, just in case that happened.
Right.
I've always either carried one of my Coltons or one of the lighter ones.
Yeah.
And you can tag it like a wheelchair or you know, a handicap stroller or anything
Right.
like that, and get them back right when you get off.
Right.
But they went through the luggage and saw it come down the chute
Right.
over there in Atlanta, and that was a
Yeah,
scary feeling.
it would bother me more in America than it would have been there that we got some guy going to just toss it. You know, it's like, man, I've been here 14 hours. You know,
Yeah.
so I mean that's scary even when you have them in good cases. I mean I've done that, and even in in calm cases, it's one of those things that's like they're going to lose it, they're going to run over it, something's going to happen to it. I mean, flying with stuff is,
Horror stories all the time.
yeah, I mean it's. But by the same token, I played a job right out here with a buddy of mine, and he set his guitar down and snapped the neck off of it right out
Really?
there. Yeah. I also did a job when I was I didn't do the job, but I was there with someone else who was playing in the band, and I watched George Jones crack a neck off of his D45 going through a door.
Really?
Yeah. Of course, he was so drunk, he was about halfway up the stage before he realized he had done it, you know. At Lake Norman Music Hall, if you remember where Lake Norman Music Hall used to be.
Yeah. That's
So-
right. But what a guitar, and a pleasure to know Ken all these years.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a wonderful thing. It's a great guitar. We got some good story to go with it. And I appreciate both of you guys coming here today and doing this.
Absolutely. It's
Man,
a pleasure.
this has been a lot of fun for me.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys.